Hey. Yep.
Okay, welcome. This is Senate Institutions, and today is January 6th, 2026, and this is our first meeting of the second year of the biennium. And we have a new member. We'll introduce ourselves in just a minute. And what we're going to discuss today is corrections and BGS as it relates to corrections. We have the interim commissioner, John Murad, with us. And then later on, we'll have Commissioner Minoli of BGS. So I am Wendy Harrison, and I represent the Windham District. I live in Brattleboro, and I chair this committee.
And I'm Rob Plunkett, Bennington Senate District, and I'm Vice Chair.
Joe Major, Windsor District.
Cliff Singles, Northeast Kingdom.
John Benson, Orange District.
And it's Senator Benson's first day as senators.
Right.
Welcome. So, thanks for being here, Commissioner. We know your time is valuable, and we know that your responsibilities are immense. Your department is the largest department in the state, and there are lots of complications and opportunities. And so if you could just give us an update of what's happening now, and this will be the first of hopefully many conversations.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Senator Harrison, for having me, and to the committee as well. Thank you very much to be here on day one is an honor to me, and I'm grateful for that. Yes, I was appointed the interim commissioner for the Department of Corrections by Governor Scott in August of this year. And that followed a 20+ year career in law enforcement. Most recently, I spent several years as the chief of police in Burlington, Vermont. Governor Scott's opportunity has been one that was not on my bingo card, as it were, but is one that I've been really grateful for. I have an amazing team of people at the Department of Corrections. It is, as you said, the largest by head count department in the state, and it has a really integral role for our communities. And the men and women I have met within it in our central office, where we work on policy and ideas and work on the collaboration with you here in Montpelier, the men and women in our facilities, which are the 6 prisons and jails that we have. It's a unified system, unlike all but 5 other states in the country. We do not have county sheriff-run jails in Vermont. Everyone, both pre-conviction and post-conviction, is held in a Vermont facility. And then the 12 district offices that we have for our probation and parole. Those men and women working in those offices and those facilities and our central office are really amazing. And I've been really grateful to get to know them and see the way in which they approach this very important work with deep compassion and a belief in the just the inherent dignity and value of everybody under their either custody or supervision. We do have a role, which is the keeping of custody of people who've been given to us by the courts. And the Department of Corrections has no control over that. We are the end stage of a process that begins usually with police and arrest, and then prosecution, and then court decisions, and ultimately people get remanded to our custody or to our supervision. We have more of those than we have in a very long time since before the pandemic. And so that is a challenge for us. I think that it goes hand in hand with an equal challenge, which is our current staffing, particularly in our facilities, which is not where we want it to be. And then that goes hand in hand, I think, with some challenges that we have around the facilities that we have, and whether or not we are either over capacity at those facilities or underbuilt for those facilities with regard to the number of people that are currently in our custody because of, as I said, processes outside our control. Irrespective of that, our job is to hold those people in custody that is also care. And the two have to go together or we will be unsuccessful. And that care includes not only a community level of care, as Secretary Jenny Samuelson, who runs the Agency of Human Services, the Vermont Department of Corrections is the only Department of Corrections in the country that falls under Human Services. I think that's a very important distinction. Secretary Samuelson believes strongly in a community level of care, and we strive to provide that inside. That is a component of care and compassion. We also believe strongly in the idea of being corrective, of actually taking folks and helping them improve so that they can succeed when inevitably they are out of our custody or out from under our supervision, and making certain that they have the tools to do that. If we can provide those tools through programming, through education, etc., is really important. I came here today from St. Johnsbury. I live in Burlington. I was in St. Johnsbury this morning to see the very first day of an academy class for our corrections academy. Actually, day 2, forgive me. New employees, bright-eyed, eager to do this work, and I was really excited about that. But I've also been recently at a graduation for a woman who was in our custody at the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility, which is our only women's facility, who graduated with an associate's degree from the Community College of Vermont through a program that we do with CCV in our facilities. And that is what I mean by care. The idea that we can, in fact, offer these kinds of tools so that people can succeed. By success for our people who are in our custody or under our supervision, I mean exiting that custody, exiting that supervision, and not returning. And so the notion would be that they are successful in the sense of not reoffending. I think that reoffense is a challenge for us. We see many of the same folks. Oftentimes when we review reports about people who are preparing for probation or parole, or who perhaps are eligible for furlough, we'll see long histories. I don't have the numbers for those immediately, but I will get them for you. There are different definitions of recidivism, both by statute and by common understanding, which is really not recidivism, but reoffense. That's a huge measure for us of success, but so is the ability of folks inside to get better in other ways. And that includes medically assisted treatment. That includes making certain that we are offering, as Secretary Samuelson says, that community level of care, which goes in some ways and oftentimes beyond what some of these individuals would get outside of our facilities. And finally, I think the biggest challenge that remains in front of us, aside from staffing and from the large number of folks that we currently have in our custody, is that women's facility that I mentioned. As wonderful as some of the things that happen there are, and that includes the work with CCV, that includes work with Lund on the Kids Apart program, where we make certain that incarcerated mothers can have time with their children to maintain maternal bonds. A program that we've expanded as well to Northern State Correctional Facility in Newport, where we are working there with men, because fathers are parents too. But making certain that we are working on those programs is happening at CCRF, but it's not happening in as conducive an environment as it could. It is one of our older facilities. It's certainly in the worst condition of most of our facilities. And we do have plans for replacing it, but we have run into some challenges. And I certainly hope that this committee can be an assistant to an aid to us in getting that rectified, in finding places for a new facility, in getting shovels in the ground. I would love it if in 2026 we had shovels in the ground. I don't know that that's possible, but boy, would that be wonderful, in order to address the challenges there and improve what we're doing there with a real emphasis on reentry, on making certain that the people there are really equipped to leave it and not return. So those are the priorities that I've got currently as interim commissioner, and they're priorities that I'm hopeful this committee will be able to partner with us on. They're things that the department's very proud of. I think it's done a lot of great work. I am proud to be a part of it and to work with the folks inside it who have come up with these ideas and have made these things come to fruition.
Thank you. Do folks have questions? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So I see that the female population has increased 44%. I want to say the number is around 156 or something like that. Has that what's the advent of that? Why the sudden? Because this is a fairly new phenomenon.
Yes, thanks for that question, Senator. It's actually higher. We're hovering in the 170s lately. We hit a really unknown number for us of 184 earlier this summer. Maybe it was 183, but I believe it was 184. That is far beyond the capacity of the building. The general population, we're about 40%, I believe, above general population in that building right now. A lot of it comes from an increase in detainees. So as I said, Vermont has a unified system, and I'm saying this in part for the YouTube audience because I believe everyone in this committee knows that already. But because we have a unified system, we are housing folks who have not yet been convicted of a crime. They've been arraigned, but they're awaiting trial. They're being held without bail usually, or held on bail that they cannot meet. That percentage of folks in our system, and that goes for the men and for the women, has changed radically. It used to be that the majority were incarcerated, sentenced, and that relationship has changed. We have more detainees than we have had in a very long time. I think that stems from a couple of different things. It stems from the sort of the ice break, ice dam break of the pandemic, finally, where the courts are back in full flux and full throated work, and we're seeing more people. Because of that, there was some really tough years for Vermont with regard to violent crime in 21, 22, and 23, and a lot of those cases are finally making their way to the courts. And so we're seeing people held for those and people in our system for those, but they have not yet been convicted. And then I think that there is a general sense in Vermont, to quote Yeats, the center cannot hold, and there's mere anarchy loosed upon the world. And a lot of communities are fed up right now with how they feel things are going. And I think that leads to a process in which police and then prosecutors and courts are sending more folks to us than they have in the past. Again, all of that is outside the control of the Department of Corrections. It's our job to make certain that all of those people are cared for safely and securely as best as we can. But that is what we have. We have a system that has increased both with the number of incarcerated folks since 2020 and has, I believe, it's almost doubled for it's like 80% higher for detainees. I have some of that information here, and I'm looking, for the camera's sake, I'm looking to Haley Summer, who is our policy person for the Department of Corrections.
I can share our slides.
Is this a good time to share your slides?
I leave that to you, ma'am.
Would they answer the question?
Some of the slides, they absolutely
Okay.
will. The slides absolutely have.
All right, so while we get those teed up, are there other questions, or did you have additional?
Just to follow up on it. First of all, I think you are the first witness that has ever quoted Yeats. Secondly, how do you accommodate when you have overcrowding, particularly in that facility?
Yes.
How does that handle?
We have additional beds that can be added to cells, floor beds, and we can increase the number of general population beds that are available in that way. We also are confronted right now with retrofitting work that is being done at the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility in order to keep us in compliance with ADA law. And that has forced us to remove women from the general population cell blocks and put them in our gymnasium. And our gymnasium looked a little bit like a high school gym after a hurricane came through or a tornado comes through a town, in the sense that there are beds and things in there. We've had to do that. We are really sort of, bursting at the seams at that facility, and we have created some additional rules with the places where we can control inflow, which includes, for example, federal partners. We have told federal partners we won't take additional detainees when we are above a certain number or at a certain number. And that helps a little bit, but we have no way to do that to, say, a court in Windham County who wants to send us a woman who's been arrested for her 8th DUI and is now going to be held at least for the weekend, if not longer than that.
Yeah.
That person must be given a bed. And so we find space where we can, but it is a pressing concern for us.
Thank you.
So what is I would think you would have short-term plan and a long-term plan.
Yeah.
So what's the short-term?
The short-term plan is to continue to find space where we can find it within the facility. And that could include at some point using the gym in a way that is not merely for relocation owing to construction, but is semi-permanent relocation. That is a terrible solution.
Yeah.
The gym is necessary for, I mean, we have a pickleball league that comes in. It's run by people outside in the community who want to connect with these incarcerated women and ensure that they are given the programming that I talked about as being integral to success. They can't do that if there's beds in some portion or the totality of that gym. There are rooms where we conduct things like the kids apart meetings with mothers, and those rooms also get moved if we have to use space for other things. We may not put beds in a room like that. It's really not conducive to that, but we may have to do other kinds of movements that end up squeezing things. It becomes a literally zero-sum game insofar as there's only so many square feet and so much room. The long-term plan for that, ma'am, is a new facility, which we're authorized to build. There is funding available to get it started. We are lacking a place to do it. And I know that Commissioner Milne is going to be speaking with you next. And she and I and our teams have been talking about this a lot, and they've been great partners. So we want to keep working on that. Medium term is really a question of what do we do if we get additional people. Generally, crime and also conviction goes in seasonal lulls. It's harder to commit public disorder in the winter when it's 9 degrees outside. There's just fewer people outside to either notice it or to commit it. So we know that summertime tends to up those numbers, and I anticipate that we will probably have more detainees in the summertime. If that gets us to a place where we are routinely 100 or 80 or more, we're going to have to explore other options, which includes movement to other facilities, opening parts of other facilities to women, or doing an entire swap of women, seeing how many women can be moved out in ways that make sense, but are conducive to public safety. And of course, the rationale for a person being in our custody is that their presence in the community is not safe. And so how do we ensure that we do that in a way that's reasonable if we're going to try to move some people out of that system? Those are our options for us. Both of those options, however, come with repercussions on the men and sort of ramifications for our male population of the other 5 facilities. And the outlet there is the same, either dribs and drabs of releases, which is going to be very marginal, or movement to other facilities or out of state for the men. That is not something we've ever done for women. It's not something we want to really even contemplate for women. But those are sort of the medium-term solutions if the numbers increase as the trends indicate they will in the coming summer of 26.
Okay.
So I just had, and again, I apologize since I'm brand new. A lot of this you folk may have already been through 100 times already, but I'm trying to get myself up to speed. I want to follow up on your question. I understood your answer about the courts getting back up and running, and of course that means more people are actually going to trial and decisions are being made. But I was also curious, is there something else? Is there a trend of the type of crimes or people with certain conditions that are driving those numbers up? By example, are we seeing the narcotic side of things as the major element? I don't know if that's true or not. You watch the news, it would seem so. And so how does that fit into the rehabilitation program? Because the needs of an addict are very different than somebody else. I also, and again, just speculate that the regardless male, female, that the education level on the incarcerated probably is not doctorate level. And so as we look at the objective of reducing the number of people that come back into the system, you know, and I was glad to hear you're focused on that. is one of the things that we know out in the general public is the trades are in desperate need of people who want to be plumbers, carpenters, you name it, in the hands-on trade. And so how do we match what's going on in our corrections facilities to the actual need out there in the community so that when people come out, they actually can find a job that's going to pay them a livable wage, and hopefully you don't see them again.
Yeah. Those are terrific questions, Senator. The notion of whether we are seeing certain kinds of crime more than others, it's not so much the crime. But if you're asking about the condition of the folks, I mean, we do have large numbers of people in our system who suffer from substance abuse disorder, and we treat that. We have about just over half of the people in our system are on medically assisted treatment, or MAT or MOUD, specifically for opioid disorder. We have an additional, I'd say it's almost 90%, I think, total, who are actually getting medicine in our system, as opposed to separate from medically assisted treatment for opioid disorder. But so that means we have a population that is having a lot of ailments, and we strive to address those. That's probably different than it was, say, 20 years ago. Maybe not that different than it was 5 or 10 years ago, but the country's woes with the opioid epidemic are well known. We are seeing, I think, we're also seeing instances of mental health, and a larger number of folks who are experiencing mental health issues or have need of treatment. We are working to expand the kinds of treatment that we offer inside, both with regard to substance abuse disorder and with regard to mental health. And we are also, I think, experiencing right now a renewed focus on lower level disorder in the communities that has sent to us people who are more likely to experience both those conditions, substance use disorder and also mental health conditions, because that often is the root of the disorder that they have sort of incorrigibly caused over long periods of time over the last several years, when the courts were not available to lower level offenses, when the focus was not on lower level offenses, owing to court closures, owing to, as I said, those particularly violent years of 2021, 2022, 2023. And now suddenly those folks are a focus for communities. And so we are seeing some of those in our facilities as detainees, in that increased detainee population. Many of them may not end up being incarcerated in the sense of being, once they're sentenced, they may have served the time that they're sentenced to, and they'll end up in supervision only. And so we may see some population drops owing to that, just moving through the detainee population. But will we get additional detainees? That's what the open question is. The rest of the country is seeing a decrease in crime. Vermont often is a year, sometimes 2 years behind those trends, in my experience as a police leader, with regard to what you see in other locations for sort of macro crime trends. So are we going to benefit from the same things that the country saw in 24, 25, which was a real downturn? I would hope so. If we do, if 26 turns into a slower year crime-wise than 25, we may not crest past where we are right now. The trends do not currently indicate that, and it's difficult to make that assessment. That's a prognostication that I certainly can't I'm not going to put money down on it either way. So I hope that answered a good deal of your question. The trades, I would love to learn more about that. It is my understanding right now that trade training inside the facilities is limited, in part because the notion of prison industries that are economically viable has been altered greatly over the past 20 years. For example, furniture, much of the furniture that you see in older state office buildings was once upon a time made largely by our correctional facilities. That is no longer the case. The money that goes into it's not economically feasible to try to compete with modular office furniture. And as a result, we no longer have furniture shops at we do have wood shops, and we train in that to teach people things, but we don't have an industry with it at our facilities. Did a similar, our print shop, which no longer can compete with the cost of printing in the outside world, as it were, that is drastically gone down owing to technology. And so those avenues are not as available to us. I want to explore the degree to which we could get them back. But I think that some of them will probably be, we will be underwriting losing money, losing efforts, but at the notion that you're improving people's condition and working with them in order to grow them and make them more likely to succeed upon release. Those are calculations I've not yet made. I don't know all the numbers yet. I'm trying to learn them too in these new days of my tenure.
And I just,
Yes.
one follow-up to that, that is, you know, when we look at the cost, there's the cost for the training, but there's a cost of an individual coming back into the correction system. So if we can keep the individual out of the correction system, how does that offset the cost of the training? And so those should be certainly looked at.
Yeah, no, that externality is not one. I'm not aware right now of a calculation for that externality of not having a person return. I know what it costs to maintain a person inside the facilities and the day-to-day cost of a single head, as it were. But what do we benefit by having a person not return? I don't know that math exists for that, but I'll certainly look into it because it'd be interesting to know.
And that's the value.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have sort of two questions. First is about the Kids Work Program at the Mail facility. It's being used. How does it compare to the use in the Chittenden facility?
It's in its earliest stages, and it's nowhere near as
So it's not even started up, or has it?
I think the last I spoke, they just hired staff.
Yeah.
Okay, is this
So
hiring
it should
staff?
be up and running soon if it's not already, but if it is, it'll be like, 3-4 weeks in.
Okay, great.
I was last at Northern for a very large exercise that we did to understand sort of tactical and operational capacity for our response teams. And they were identifying the place where it was going to go. And that was about 4 weeks ago. So it's possible that there's been a visitor too, but if the staff hasn't been identified, then not yet.
Gotcha. And the other question I had was just about the incarcerated numbers, and I'm glad you mentioned that it's, very different from pre-COVID. And a lot of the charts we've seen start in 2021. And I know that before that, the levels, and you can answer this, are relatively similar to what they are now. So what's the difference in terms of how difficult it is for corrections to deal with that versus, pre-COVID versus now? And the numbers were the same before pre-COVID and now. Why is it more difficult?
Well,
Why is it not?
I think that it is, and you're correct. There were times in the system. The Defender General once, when I met with the Defender General upon taking this job, the Defender General told me, I want to say he said that there were somewhere in the order of 20,000 people under supervision at one point in Vermont. Now he said that off the top of his head, so I don't need to quote him on that, although I guess I just did. But I don't mean to say that I don't want to hold him to that. But certainly there were more than the 4,500 that we currently have under supervision. And he wasn't speaking about incarcerated, he was speaking about people on probation, parole, or furlough. But that says that once upon a time the system was a good deal larger than it is today. And we know that our incarcerated numbers, I think, topped out around 2,400 at one point in the last 2 decades at some point. They have been falling steadily over those 2 decades until, the recent uptick really began post-pandemic in 21, 22. I agree with you. I want to give you some data and sort of amend some of the charts that we're going to present to go back a little bit farther to the mid 20 teens. What's the difference? The biggest difference is the loss of facilities. There was an extra prison in Windsor. And there were, we have, for example, there's an unbuilt portion of Southern State, which is our newest facility, and it's 25 years old. 25, years of 24/7, 365 difficult operation. But there's an empty space there where we could build. There are, I think, changes in the ways in which we have options to put, again, detention is challenging for us because detention, we can't even program detained people in the same way that we program people who are sentenced. And so that doesn't answer your question about what we do, but it does make a challenge about how sort of cohesive the space can feel for those working in it. And that can also mean that even if the numbers were higher in, let's say, 2017, which I believe they were, although I don't know that for certain, but I believe the overall numbers were higher in 2017, and we were already without the Windsor facility at that point. I think they were much more. They were much more predominantly people who had been sentenced, and that creates a different dynamic inside the spaces.
Thank you. And I was going to ask.
We also, I'm sorry if I may, I apologize. We also had a larger number of people out of state. We currently have about 150 people out of state. At the beginning of the year, we had about 120. I authorized the transport of our first large scale out of state transportation in the last 5 years, because of the pressures that we're feeling. But I think that at one point we had as many as 300 or more people who were in the out of state facilities. And so that too was an outlet for us that we have available to us by contract, but not by budget.
Yeah. Okay. And I do have a question I was going to ask Haley separately, but I'll ask it here.
And I'll just listen to her.
So the charts that we had, so it's 21 to now, 12 data points each year. I'm assuming that's an average each month. And I'm assuming that's a daily average. When is that number calculated? And is it first thing in the morning? Or is it after they've gone to court and they've been released?
That's such a good question for the people that make the charts.
Okay, so we don't know that.
And it's not me, but I can definitely ask.
Okay.
Yeah, we get the data in the first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
But that doesn't answer your question. So, because the Jordan Pasha, who runs that data, amazing employee, he runs it, sent it usually around 6:30 a.m. I see it upon first waking up. What's our head count? Oh golly, how did CRCF get to 178? Oh geez, those kinds of things. But I don't know for sure whether those numbers come from the last head count it lights out at 9 p.m. or whether those are numbers that he's somehow calculating that morning because they've already gotten up and been counted again in the morning prior to 6. If it's the second, then it's absolutely before the court. And if it's on some level, actually, even if it's the night before, it's before the court because we're not changing those numbers.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out. The reason I ask is that if you got a number for a daily head count, it's in the morning. Many of those people will probably be released.
Yes, although some of them will be. There will be people brought to us again.
Yes,
so
right.
That's very true on a Monday morning.
Yeah.
A Monday morning has an abnormally large number because of people held over the weekend.
I'm unfortunately aware.
Yes. So the cops arrest them on Friday night. They get held, and now we have them until Monday morning. At which point they're arraigned, and out they go. So you will see a big dip on Monday to Tuesday night. But the difference between, say, a Monday morning and a Tuesday morning, Tuesday morning and a Wednesday morning. Apologies, is relatively small.
In the end, it might not matter.
Yeah.
My question might not matter at all, but I'd like to.
But we can get an answer for you.
All right. Any others? We did visit 2 facilities last year. 3 of us did, and we plan to visit more this year.
Yeah.
So that'll be good.
Yes, we will be honored to have you. And if, for example, anybody on the committee wishes, the next time we have something like a CCV graduation or a high school graduation, if any of you would be interested, I'd be happy to make you aware of those, and then you can choose to see whether that fits in your very busy schedules.
That would be true.
I find those to be pretty. I mean, I like weddings and graduations and birthdays and things, and those are. I went to I mentioned a woman graduating from CCV. You're correct. Not a lot of people are prepared, sir, to be at the college level, but we have a very robust high school program as well. And 2 young men who graduated from high school at Northern State earlier in, I think, November that I went and attended that graduation. And, their journey to that was really long, and it was the result of really dedicated staff bringing them through. For people who engage at times, then don't engage, and have challenging personalities and have a lot of things that they're working through. And golly, high school was hard enough for me being out at MMU, free to do what I wanted to do, as opposed to being incarcerated. But they made it through, and now have that. And upon someday release, that will be an additional tool for them. So I'm hopeful that will be good for them. I'd like to make you aware of those kinds of things, and if
Invite us.
that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then we'll ask you to come again so
Yes,
that we
please.
can keep keep in touch,
Yes.
and a lot is happening, and we definitely want to improve the system. That's our goal.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Did you have?
Yeah, could I just ask one other question? You said you're short on staff, and that seems to be true in a lot of industries. Anything that you would attribute to why you're not able to attract additional people into the corrections
Yeah.
department?
We're actually hiring quite well. It's the retention part that's a challenge for us right now. At its most challenged, the system was down, the department was down was a little more than 30%, almost 35%, I think, total. It has clawed its way back owing to great work under my predecessor, Commissioner Demmel, and a lot of just terrific work by the team, to the point where right now we're at 12% this morning overall. It's worse, however, in the facilities. So that's an overall number, but in the facilities, it's higher in the 15, and some facilities are higher than that. And then if I look narrowly at our population of correctional officers, 1s and 2s, which are contractual differences, our CO1s and CO2s are maybe higher than that as well, as far as percentage deficits. What are we doing? We are working hard at hiring. We're seeing real success with hiring. Retention is more difficult because we need a lot of overtime. I mean, when you have smaller than normal populations of staff, the only answer is to say, well, and also we've opened up new wings, for example, wings that had been closed, either owing to the pandemic or owing to not the smaller populations of incarcerated individuals. We've had to open new wings. That means more staff, means spreading staff more thinly, means asking the staff that we do have to work more overtime, and that can lead to issues with retention. We are really trying to ensure that we're working with the Department of Labor on recruiting. I just had a long conversation while I was at the academy today for the new recruiting class. Right there were about 30 new recruits going to all 6 different facilities. And they're eager to start, and then some of them won't either make it through the academy, some of them won't stay once they get to the facilities. How do we work on that? That's an open question for us. We're trying to do more with regard to opportunity, more with regard to training. I mentioned that large scale training drill that we did. That's not something that a brand new employee would participate in, but it's a sign of possibility. So a brand new employee can look at something like that and say, well, I'd like to be on one of those special response teams someday and get to do that big drill. And so we are always trying to figure out how to make this a place where people really feel I can do a 25-year career with this place and feel fulfilled throughout it. Certainly there are many people in our central office who fit that bill exactly. They have been with us for decades, and they have risen and found fulfillment. So it is possible. And it's about communicating that to new folks.
Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you still have about 100 bed capacity out of state that's not filled?
We currently have about 150 beds out of state that we could nominally fill by contract, but we do not have budget for that.
Okay. None for women out of state population.
That is correct. We have to the anecdotal knowledge of all the more knowledgeable people in the department than I, we have never sent women out of state. We have one or two for example, individual women whose crimes are of high profile. We have interstate compact swaps where we can move people to other facilities, and we have done that. But when I say moved women out of state, I mean sort of en masse or as a means of controlling population numbers.
Thank you.
Okay, and actually, I do one more question or comment. Some of us a couple of years ago went to visit prisons in Maine, which you probably know. Some of them are they copy the model of Norway generally, and they're a much nicer place to work, as well as a better place to rehabilitate.
Yeah.
And do you have any idea, or have you asked that state if they would be willing to take some of our folks? If
No.
that would be a place.
No, I have not. I know, Commissioner Liberty, Randy Liberty, what a terrific name for somebody who's going to be the Commissioner of Corrections in the state. But Commissioner Randy Liberty of Maine, I know him and have spoken with him. I've not asked that. I don't know how feasible that is, but it's certainly something that we could explore as we look at all of the options available to us if the headcount, particularly at CRCF, continues to grow. So thank you for that. That's a thought.
Okay. All right. We're good. Okay, well, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Guys. All right, and we will go offline, please. We'll resume at 2:15.